Hello everyone, this is Eric and I'm here with Chad Tatro, and today we're going to talk about how to write your first WebWorks application. The topics I will discuss are the IDEs and editors that can be used to write your applications, what a basic index.html and config.xml file look like, how you can preview the content in the browser, and how to set up a local web server.
Hey, this is Chad, and next we're going to talk about which IDEs and editors you can use to create a WebWorks application. The main point is just to remember that you can use anything you like to write your code. In the end, what you're creating is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Each of these IDEs come with different extensions and plugins that you can use to make developing easier. JSLint is available, which highlights syntax errors and issues within your code so you can visually see that there's a problem and fix it before packaging. There are also minifiers for your JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. It's best practice to minify your code before you package just to keep everything as small as possible. There are also extensions for code formatting, which also keep your code nice and formatted and easy to read. For the more advanced developers, there are also build scripts available which help you deploy and launch applications.
Now that we've talked about some of the IDEs and editors that you can use to create your applications, let's look at our first project, Hello World. To start off, let's create a folder on our desktop and rename it to Hello World. This folder will hold all of our HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, along with any other resources such as images or videos. One of the most basic building blocks is index.html, the entry point into our application. Inside the Hello World folder, create a new text document and rename it to index.html. Here you can see a basic index.html file where we set the title, we include some CSS, and we also include some JavaScript. This isn't any different than a standard web application. To leverage WebWorks APIs and BlackBerry 10 functionality, we'll have to include the webworks.js file. This will create a global BlackBerry variable that allows us to use the various features that we've noted in our config.xml file. Note that before doing anything, we're waiting for the DOM content loaded event. This ensures that the entire document and its elements are ready for use. Before we can actually use the BlackBerry object, we have to wait for the WebWorks Ready event. When this fires, we know that the object has been fully loaded and is ready to use. In our case, we're using the BlackBerry.Identity API to grab a unique identifier for the device. Next, let's look at how to add more functionality through the config.xml file.
The config XML file is used to configure your application to run on BlackBerry 10. I've created a very basic file here to show you what's needed to get started with development. The most important parts of the config XML are shown here. At the top you can see we specify an ID for our application, in this case Awesome App. Below it we specify a name for the application, which will be shown on the device. Next, we're specifying a content source. This is the actual file that will load your application. Generally, people use index.html, but this could also be anything you want, including an external URL. The access element is used to whitelist specific domains for use within your application. Any access to an external server your application makes, that domain needs to be whitelisted in the config XML. Next, we have our icon element, which simply specifies the icon for your application. It's good to note that icon sizes are 114 by 114. Next, I'm specifying a splash screen element. You'll notice I have a few different ones defined here. The reason being is you can specify different splash screens for different devices. The first one, which is 1280 by 768, and the second one, 768 by 1280, will allow you to have a splash screen for both landscape and portrait. The third splash screen element, 720 by 720, is targeting the BlackBerry Q10. The last thing we'll look at here is the feature element. This is where you specify what APIs your application is going to call. For this example, I've shown the feature ID for when we include BBM in our application, blackberry.bbm.platform. If this feature wasn't set up in my config, my app would have no access to BBM. So there are a few ways to preview your content in the browser. The first way is by loading your content from the file system. To do this, you need to configure Chrome and Ripple to have access to the local file system. You can do this by simply right-clicking on the Chrome shortcut, select Properties, and at the very end of the target, add the following parameter, --allow file-access-from-files. Next, you'll need to configure Ripple. To do this, simply load Chrome, click on the Options tab, select Settings, Extensions, and you'll notice a list of all installed extensions. Scroll down to Ripple Emulator and select the checkbox that says Allow Access from File URLs. Now that Chrome and Ripple are set up, you can now preview your content in the browser. Each operating system will contain a default Ripple Sites folder where you can host your content. To access your project, you simply load localhost port 9910 and then the path to your project.
The third way to host your HTML5 content in the browser is by setting up a local web server. For the easiest installation, we recommend using something like WAMP server or XAMPP, which comes with an Apache, MySQL, and PHP instance so that you can do both client-side and server-side development. Using the software will allow for the easiest configuration of your web server. Once you've installed your web server software, there will be a folder similar to the Ripple Sites folder where you can host your HTML5 projects and preview them in the browser. For an Apache installation, this is the htdocs folder. For WAMP server, this is the www folder. The Apache installation comes with an HTTPD configuration file that dictates the behavior of your server. One change you may want to make in your configuration file is to allow access to your web server from all locations. You can do this by locating the directory element that specifies your HTML5 project folder and adding the Allow From All tag. This will ensure that you can test your HTML5 projects not only from your computer, but also from any devices that you have on the network.